So the topic of this discussion, we got 35 minutes, so we're going to move fast. Supporting true innovation in agriculture. And I think we need to do one thing first. We need to understand what is the difference between innovation and disruptive technologies. Innovation is defined as change, alteration, revolution, and upheaval. When you think of disruption, you look up the definition of disruption, it's a radical change in an industry, business strategies, and especially involving the introduction of new products and services that create new markets. So our topic is supporting true innovation in agriculture. Is it innovation or is it disruption? So my first question is this. I'm going to pose this to all three of you. What innovations or disruptions are each of you most excited about in ag tech? Neil?
Since the days of Henry Wallace in the 1920s, pioneers had a commitment to working directly with the farmer and knowing that the farmer sells best to their neighbors with new disruptive technologies. And so what it looks like to us is that the farmer is inundated today with too many choices, too many options, too much complexity. And what excites me is the chance to provide the farmer with simplicity. And so we, as a research organization and a company like Pioneer, can absorb that complexity for the farmer and deliver solutions to them rather than just product by product. And we can talk more about particular products and technologies a little later, but there's some specific options that are really exciting on top of that.
Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned, there is an enormous potential and need for innovation in agriculture. We as Bayer, we always had a lot of innovation. We are since more than 150 years very active and very innovative. And now, of course, what we are observing is there are a lot more coming outside of the classical innovation, new active ingredients and so on, what we are doing anyway. And we are looking very much into these new fields, and we might talk about that later on a bit more in detail, because also, more or less like you said, we strive very much for more customized agronomic solutions to the farmers, more complete solutions, integrating everything from chemical crop protection, biological crop protection, seeds, traits, digitalization. So this is going to change a lot for farming.
Yeah, and maybe just to carry on from the perspective of the other two is, I think the way I think about what we have in front of us is the opportunity with all these interfaces. So we're here at this conference talking about different disciplines coming together to create opportunity, and I think in the ag space in general, this is what's true. Because as Neil pointed out, growers are sitting there with a lot of information, a lot of choices, but that also is creating tremendous opportunity. And it's how do we bring these things together to solve these problems effectively for growers in a way that is simple, straightforward, and I would say driven in a way that is far more maybe analytical than intuitive. And that's a shift for our industry in terms of how we want to apply technologies, how do we want to apply knowledge. And you could see all these different scientific disciplines now converging together in ag. And I think that's the excitement, right, is how do we bring additional disciplines that 15 years ago we maybe weren't even thinking about. I think about some of the biological opportunities like gene editing, RNAi, and then I think about this huge opportunity with data analytics, knowledge, machine learning, automation, and how that is now starting to come together. And ultimately, as Matthias points out, it really does come together in terms of how you integrate and create simplification and opportunity for grower customers.
Bob, I'd like to expand upon that a little bit further since we've got to this point. I want to find out from you at Monsanto, how do you support true innovation or disruption, and how do you work with entrepreneurs and startups? I know you got Monsanto Growth Ventures that has done a lot of, been very active in the Silicon Valley and across the country with different technologies. How do you do this? How does a big company come along to these startups and make sure that the culture doesn't override with the innovation and disruption that they've created?
Yeah, so about 6 years ago we created Monsanto Growth Ventures, which was really our opportunity to more directly interface with entrepreneurs and startups and really to work in that ecosystem. And it's been amazing for me to see how we've had the opportunity now over the last several years to both facilitate and review and work together with other investors and entrepreneurs to really become part of that ecosystem. And for us, we've invested now in a number of different companies. Each year we're probably looking at several hundred different opportunities. And what's so important in all this is we have a very small team in Monsanto Growth Ventures, but it's, as you realize and all of you realize, it's really those personal connections and relationships that still make much of this happen. And then the companies that we invest in today are very wide-ranging, and they're far greater than some of our core capabilities in some of the biological sciences. So companies like Blue River, which are working on automation, Pivot Bio, which is working in the microbiome, and then companies like Resson, which are working in machine learning. So, we're really casting a very wide net. And the other piece is some of these companies didn't know much about ag. And so we've been able to help show them that there are opportunities outside of maybe their core space, which might be in pharma or other areas, and showing to them that there are opportunities in agriculture that we can help facilitate with Monsanto Growth Ventures. So it's been very exciting, and it's very important, I think, for our industry to continue to do.
Bob, one of the biggest things that I've noticed in my involvement in some of the tech companies in San Francisco and Boston, places I've been in Austin, Texas, that we're finding out people from outside ag, and then you bring some people from inside ag, and that hybrid, excuse me for overusing that word in our industry, but that hybrid response that we get from that synergy is very effective in creating the model, I think, that's going to help us be more productive in the future. Neil, share a little bit with what you do at Pioneer as far as in some of those same things, working with startups, and what are some of the near-term solutions to continue to advance this?
So let me turn to one of my favorite technologies and talk a little bit about the innovation collaborations we have along that way. So genome editing is a new technology that gives us a chance to improve genetics, to improve how we breed, to improve products, make them more sustainable, bring them to the customer in even more efficient ways than we did. And so with climate change, with changing patterns of pathogen pressure, we can actually bring in new traits, new genetics from foreign sources into conventional varieties we have and adapted to particular regions. And when I say foreign sources, what I really mean is it's still corn in corn, but it's maybe corn from Brazil, and we get some traits and we put them into a corn variety for Iowa. In doing this kind of work, and it's very broadly applicable to a wide range of crops, we're partnering with a number of companies. And so, as Bob said, for us, a good example, we've invested in and collaborated with Caribou Biosciences up in the Bay Area. And the level of ag knowledge wasn't exactly deep at the beginning, but we've helped them understand how to apply and think about the technology in agriculture, partner with them at the science level, and certainly they've helped us continue to innovate with new applications, continue to improve the technology to make genome editing more broadly useful. We've also collaborated with academics. We have a great relationship with the University of Vilnius. They had some very early efforts in genome editing based on years of work in DNA modifying enzymes. And again, we could take advantage of that expertise that we didn't have in-house. And I think that's the key, is not just the technology. It is about the people, their knowledge, and changing how we think. I've tried to bring a bit to Pioneer, a little more of coming from a small company background, the ability to look at small companies and really treasure some of the ways they work and partner in a way that they can get the benefit of this kind of scale that we can bring in testing ideas.
That's good. So when we think about integrated ag solutions within the industry, I guess I'd like to ask Matthias and Neil both this question. What are you doing to connect the products you produce, the way they're used on our farms, and get closer to consumer to create that transparency portal? Are you looking at technologies like blockchain, or, let's face it, we produce a lot of information on the farm, you're producing a lot of information. We want to make sure that we're helping consumer understand the food that they're getting on their table is safe and nutritious and how it's been produced. So what are you doing within Bayer to produce that kind of information?
Actually, we are working together very, very intensively with the end consumer and also with the whole food chain. So we are in contact with major retailers, globally food processors. So we connect the food chain. We have a lot of food chain projects where this goes directly into all that information and leads finally to different products that we develop. For example, in our vegetable seeds business, we are developing specific melon varieties specifically for the Walmarts, the Rayleighs, and so on of that world. So we very much connect all these areas. Just coming back to the question that you raised before, I mean, we are approaching all fields of innovation. On the one hand, of course, with internal research activities very, very intensively, where we are spending a lot of money, but we're also having a lot of good partnerships, collaborations, where, for example, with GRDC, the Grain Research and Development Corporation in Australia, where they are basically contributing people, money into our research activities in order to find new herbicidal active ingredients. We have a big open innovation platform in the meantime, which is quite interesting. We call this grants for targets, grants for traits, where basically everybody in academia can apply for some money, but also scientific advice from our side. So we're working together with many people. And then, of course, also venture activities. Also, 5 years ago, we were considering to establish an own venture arm in Bayer. We haven't done that, but we went to very professional venture capital companies, like, for example, Finisterre, Flagship, Anterra, Radical, and many others, in order to have, let's say, a very broad access to innovative startup cutting-edge technologies, but not only here in the US, also the global distribution was very, very important for us. And that's the reason, for example, why we're working together with Trendline in Israel, a very, let's say, agile field where innovation is created.
So I'm going to come back to the question about how we're working with others in the industry, communicating. How many people in the room know what CRISPR is other than your lettuce on a good day? All right, so that's a pretty good number. I think this is a probably larger proportion of people who really know what CRISPR is and how it's applied to food here in this room than around the planet generally. And so we know that every time there's a new technology, there's a technology adoption curve. There's time to get comfortable with the technology, maybe to understand the technology, certainly to appreciate the benefits of the technology. And so we have started, 2-3 years ago now already, with a series of engagements around the world, in part what we call an insight series, where we invite external panel of people, maybe 15, 20 people from supply chain, the food system, regulators, academics, you name it, ethicists, to talk about the new technologies that we're trying to bring. Because technology adoption is tough, but when it comes to food, I think it's really tougher. And the first question I think people wonder about is, what are you doing to my food? Why are you changing it? I like it the way it is. And so we spent a lot of time to reach out, to understand how people feel about it, to explain, but maybe to do a little less of what I think we maybe did 20 years ago, which was maybe shouting the answers a little bit and trust us, it's going to be fine, it's okay for your food. We've really tried to listen actively to people. One of the things we've done recently is to launch a small website to help explain a little bit about genome editing and CRISPR technology. I've got a card here in my pocket that gives you the website. I'm happy to share that with anyone in the audience afterwards. It's our effort to try to start communicating. We can listen to people as well as explain. There's a very friendly video on there about the technology and what it means for food. I think the key is to really talk to people about the benefits of what we're developing. And for a technology like genome editing, the benefits are far broader than the crops we work in. Really, I would hope in the next 10 years we start to see all those crops up here in this, in these pots that have been edited, have new alleles that provide healthier food, perhaps longer shelf life, tastier food, a range of benefits, and food produced in more sustainable ways. So we're trying to communicate that. early on now, still 3 years before our first product we hope comes to the market.
Sounds good. So Matthias has a little bit to add to that.
I mean, you're making a fantastic point, Neil, because I think we are all excited about all the innovation that is coming, that we see there now, and that we all need. But I think there are two components that are very, very important. First, it needs to contribute to a more sustainable agriculture. I think that's very, very important. And the second one, what you mentioned, Neil, is the social responsibility that we have. So we have to enter in a lot more intensive dialogue with society in order to get the acceptance for all the technologies that we are working on. So this communication from the big companies that we have been sitting here to the society, with politicians, with NGOs, I think that's absolutely crucial for the success of all the efforts that we are doing.
So I guess the next question I'd like to ask, and any one of you can answer this, and as a producer, we see mergers and acquisitions occur, and oftentimes after that occurs, we see a bit of a slowdown in the volume and velocity of innovation as it comes out to the producer, giving us products and solutions that help us improve our operations and improve the food supply. So if any of you can add, what are your plans going forward to make sure that doesn't happen with the mergers and acquisitions that's taking place now in agriculture?
So I'm familiar there's a big one happening somewhere up here.
Well done.
So, I look at what we're doing with Bayer, and it is completely predicated on driving new innovation and adding innovation into the space. The way I look at it is the challenges that we're facing in agriculture continue to grow. The reason we participate in forums like this and the reasons we engage with entrepreneurs and others is because even by ourselves, we don't have the full bandwidth to drive, I think, what we need to drive to be successful in agriculture and to feed a growing population and to do it in a safe and sustainable way. And so we both have a huge opportunity internally in terms of what we're bringing together in our merger with Bayer, where we are going to bring disciplines together and competencies that neither one of us, one has a tremendous competency in chemistry, we have a tremendous competency in biology, and I always say the magic in science happens at interfaces. And we see tremendous opportunity in being able to facilitate that. And the reality also is bringing together the financial capabilities of those two R&D budgets, I think, is going to be critical, because some of the things that we do and how much we spend in ag is very small if you look at it in comparison to many other industries. And so I just think it's critical that we can bring those resources and those competencies together successfully and then wrap them with all of this tremendous external innovation that is happening around us and being able to use that to better further the objectives and goals of our customers. And so it's about innovation. It isn't about detracting innovation.
Yeah, let me just add to that one. When we announced the merger, that plan, I mean, the immediate reaction was, wow, what a big company will be created with so much sales. That's all nice, that's wonderful. What is really exciting, and this is what you said, the whole deal is about innovation. To bring the two most innovative companies in our industry here together. and finding the opportunities between these two companies. And you mentioned the chemicals competencies, the genetical competencies, but then also the data science part. So in this triangle, there is an enormous opportunity to create new innovation, and then of course competing with another fantastic company in the future. So I think this is what we try to move always away from this whole pure revenue picture to a really innovation driven merger that we have here in mind. Now you have to say something.
Say a little something, yeah. So, competition is wonderful, makes us better. But I wonder whether sometimes people worry and legitimately about when mergers happen, just the time it takes to merge. There's a reality of the complexity of bringing together two big organizations. I don't think you have this problem, but it's not simple. And coming from a small company where the biggest organization I ever had was 150 people, and there's a few more of that in this merger between Dow and DuPont in the ag business, it'll take us some time to figure out what's our culture, how are we going to operate. We can do a lot of planning. It's been too long a period of planning so far for us, but we're almost there. Sometimes it feels like there's water behind a dam, and we're just ready for the dam to burst and get on with innovating and building the new company. So probably there is some legitimate worry about what it's going to take just to get through that merger time. But beyond that, in terms of just pure focus and innovation, this has been internally and externally our absolute focus with the new company in mind. When Jim Collins, whenever he talks externally, it's about innovation. And I've been really pleased to see, as a new leader of the Ag division, that absolute commitment to innovation in order to provide integrated customer solutions. It's something we talk about a lot. In many ways, it's the opportunity that's enabled, and it's a similar story at some level. We can bring together a full range of tools that a farmer needs, and using sort of predictive capabilities, and we talked about this, Kip, before we came on. I mean, farmers want to be able to know as soon as they can what the end result's going to be when they plant that seed at the beginning of the year. And to be able to do that, you have to not only be able to diagnose what's happening in the field, to monitor it, but then to have tools to adjust to it. Pioneer is a seed company. We have maybe limited tools to adjust, help the farmer mid-year, but as an integrated production ag company, we have a far greater set of solutions. That's part of our planning process, is thinking about that. There's a lot of excitement to get going and see the start line come for the new merged company.
So I'll ask this question. I hope there's some things that keep the three of you up at night thinking about this, but do you ever get to the point when you look at innovations and disruptions, some unintended consequences that might become a reality from some new innovation that you sponsor, support, grow, or is in the industry that may come back and pose a threat to you? The reason I bring this up, last weekend I judged a contest in Indiana. It's called the AgBot Challenge. The challenge was for teams to come in from different universities and construct an autonomous tractor with a planner on it. It had certain chores it needed to accomplish. It needed to load itself. It needed to drive itself to the field, plant in a straight row, put the seed in at the right depth and everything, and return to its parking site when done. We had teams from San Luis Obispo that team put together a scrap tractor for $5,000 and completed the task, and we had another team with probably $500,000 that had a trailer with 32 servers in it and all kinds of equipment in there. It accomplished it as well. But when I think about that, the results and the consequences, instead of the farmer sitting at the coffee shop or at the grain elevator making the comment, bragging about someone's 48-row planter, maybe we have teams of autonomous tractors that move from one area to the other. The radical model changes that could come within agriculture and disrupt the industry, whether it's a John Deere or something over on the ag, chem, and seed side. Is there anything you see from your perspectives in the ag and seed side and some of the solutions you're trying to advance that could be a threat in the future?
I mean, the way I think about that is a couple of different ways. So the first is, you have to be aware of things are going to change, right? And so, you look at business models that ultimately have been highly successful, and then some disruptive technology has come along and completely undermined the thesis of their business operating model. And we're in a very dynamic time, I think, right now in agriculture, and that's both exciting and both potentially threatening, especially if you have well-established businesses that rely on certain things, right? And I think what you have to imagine, though, is you have to be today much more agile in order to be, I believe, successful. Mm-hmm. And part of that agility, I think, again, is making sure that you are well connected into those potential innovation disruptors that don't have to be threatening, but can reshape how you do business and what you do business in, and how it ultimately can improve what you're trying to deliver to your customer base. I think the harder one, the one that's probably in some sense more threatening and is more difficult because it's not what we necessarily control, is how we talked about it earlier. It's how society feels about what we do and the tools we use and how we deliver those products and services into society. And I could take my shirt off, I could show you the wounds of, being a bit of the poster child for what has happened, in the discussion around GMOs. And the lessons there are very clear, and that we focus too much on the science, and we didn't focus enough on the dialogue, and we felt secure that logic and science and all of these things that naturally we believe are the order of how we should make decisions prevail. And that's not the reality, I think, and we have to be much more cognizant. And to me, that's maybe the thing that I'm most aware of and most cognizant of as I think about what are the potential threats to what we're doing and how we're doing them.
Yeah, let me just quickly add. I mean, when we the problem in bigger corporations like I'm working in is that sometimes we are not agile enough. We have to drive the change, especially in times where there's so much new innovation coming, so much accelerated innovation also. And we made the experience when we started our digital farming activities now 2.5 years ago. I mean, the reactions when the comment came up, yeah, wow, then we are going to sell less herbicides. Is that possible? Yeah, of course. We have to disrupt our own business, otherwise others are going to do it. But to change this mindset is a very difficult activity, I can tell you. And so I think we have to work a lot more on that culture of agility, change, constant change, disruptive innovation. And I think this is, when it comes to the cultural, the new culture of the combination of Monsanto and Bayer going forward, it's very important that this is a very important component.
As Yogi Berra said, predictions are very hard to make, especially about the future. And, so you think back maybe to the 1920s when Bosch and Haber came up with how do we make, synthetic fertilizer, and maybe never contemplated what might happen in some of the, those dead zones in the ocean around the world. So, we know that advances come with unintended consequences. But I think the kind of agility and monitoring of effects that we can have today are much greater than they were, 70, 80 years ago. So, our ability to see change, to adapt to change, one of the benefits of all the digital tools we're talking about and engaging with farmers and seeing what's happening on the farm is that we can help farmers produce more with fewer inputs. And so, one of our early digital tools is a platform called Encirca. We work with farmers in a nitrogen app. It's an app the farmer can have on their cell phone. And this past year, we've seen that the benefits in corn have been maybe close to a 5% yield benefit with about a 5% reduction in nitrogen use. And so sometimes the technologies we bring are in some ways adapting to the changes we've had, maybe some of the unintended consequences. But I'm fundamentally a technology believer. We can solve a lot of problems, and we're on a good course to do that. And these kinds of tools that help us monitor better, right? What's happening to the water, what's happening with inputs, will help us do that.
I think we're ready to go with some questions.
Yes. Kip, why don't you point it out, and we'll try and get the microphone.
Does anyone have any questions?
There's somebody right over there.
Roger Beachy, hi Neil and others. The question is, how do you, in the merger culture, ensure that you're focused on the outcomes and the well-being of the farmer to ensure that his or her profitability continues to go, especially in this time of decreasing margins in the row crops and competition in the fresh vegetables and so forth? How do you convince them that after the last 20 years of extracting value, you're ready to help them gain more value without additional cost.
Yeah. I would tell you that, first of all, I'm a fundamental believer that if companies aren't creating value for their customers, they don't survive. And every year, growers make a choice with their pocketbook, especially in the seed business, in terms of whether they believe you're creating value for them or you're not. And we as a company and we as a business and an industry won't survive if we aren't focused and creating more value for customers. And I probably wouldn't quite agree with you in saying that we've been extracting value. I believe fundamentally most growers would tell me we've created a lot of value. Now we share in that value, of course, right? But fundamentally, we have to create value for our customers. Otherwise, there's not going to be value for our business, and the whole thing will not survive.
Yeah, I guess I agree with Bob completely here. I take a little exception to that point about extracting value and suddenly there's going to be a change. We've been adding value for a long time, and if there's any appeal, it's that we can actually add more value at a quicker pace than we have in the past. And that's what probably all these mergers will achieve. I can only speak for our merger, but I think that's what we hope to be able to achieve, is actually to enhance the pace of value creation with additional tools. It's a great promise for the farmer, and I can tell you that when we've had our discussions in planning for the future of the new company, the farmer is at the very center of that conversation. And it's not just about making the farmer more productive in terms of yield, it's about making the farmer's livelihood and life better. And that's the fundamental anchor to the value proposition that we've talked about.
I'm going to respond to that as a farmer, because we ask this question all the time, and we get in many different audiences and landowners and everybody else, and I will agree with them that the products that they're giving us do increase productivity. They make our business more sustainable. It helps us in our ecosystem, our environments we operate in. But I often look back at the model and say, looking at our ag land that we own or lease, that land has the same capacity as it did 50 and 100 years ago, or maybe even 500 years ago. That 10 years ago we were buying for $3,000 an acre, where today we're spending in the Midwest $10,000 to $12,000 an acre. And it hasn't increased its own capacity. It's been these technologies that's increased the capacity. So we look at that and we say, if anything, we've extracted too much value on the land side of the agricultural operations.
Let me just add to the points that made my two colleagues here. In Bayer, we always had the philosophy that we want to create win-win situations. So we want to create value at the customer level, and both really should profit from it. And we are going even a step further. I mentioned before food chain projects. Here is it where we have basically the grower, we have the processor, we have the retailers, we have ourselves, where we are creating really win-win-win-win situations. So everybody has an advantage out of this activity. So I think that's a philosophy that we will also going to continue to apply when the companies are getting together.
Kip, I can't see how much time you have left. Do we have time for one more?
5 minutes.
Okay. More questions?
If no one's got a question, I've got one. Okay.
G'day, Matthew Feely, Nuffield Scholar from Australia. Can I just pick up on something Rob said there? We're at an innovation conference here, and innovation tends to come from when there's a collision of ideas, often from people looking from outside in. We're talking about the mergers and acquisition phase at the moment. When the big six become big three, four.
Math starting.
Maybe 5. Yeah.
So, Rob, you said that the farmers actually vote with their checkbook because they have choice. The option for that choice is going to become a lot limited, and it's going to become a lot more, if you don't choose this, well, what's happening outside of those big four, they really haven't got a chance to compete. I'd just like your comment around the hybrid vigour, I guess, that comes from ideas clashing and collaboration from people looking from outside in.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a perception, right? That there's going to be fewer channels of choice in the market. And But the way I look at it is, two things. So the first is, again, reiterating, I think, what you said. We are going to be internally bringing competencies together, and I've already in my head, I haven't shared them all with Matthias, but I've got ideas on how biology can accelerate what we're doing to invent new and better chemistries. And I'm sure they've got ideas on the Bayer side to help us in terms of how we think about our seed improvement work that we do. So we will take the opportunity to see how we can harness that and deliver that to customers. And so I do fundamentally believe we are going to have value creation within the things that we today provide to the market. And I believe that the other deals in the market space will do the same. So I think there's a rich opportunity here to actually accelerate what we each individually are doing, because we are bringing together pieces that we hadn't before in our industry, even though we're now smaller numbers overall. But then the second piece of this, I think, is really, we are going to be participating, I believe, more broadly in more areas because we have the opportunity to do so. We won't be as siloed in our individual competencies, and I think we will actually be participating more broadly than we have in the past. You look at what we're doing, for example, in Monsanto with our climate acquisition and working in the space around providing decision support tools to growers. Those opportunities, I think, are going to come and emerge out of all of the players in the industry. And then the other part is, as this space in ag continues to be touched and evolved by other technologies and other pieces, I think that you will see participation by others in ways that are different and unique. Even technically, Neil talked about gene editing. One of the beautiful things of that technology is it's highly, I would say, democratic in the sense of there's going to be many academics and others that are going to participate in this technology that we can help support and ultimately use to provide new products to customers. And so I kind of think of this whole thing actually as expanding, not necessarily contracting. I know there's a perception there, but I think the reality is going to be very different.
Maybe just add another sort of quick point. I think this idea of the clash of ideas, the different technologies that come together is incredibly important, and we're committed to partnering and collaborating and bringing in new ideas, new capabilities. I'm reminded of the sort of the grand era of molecular biology in the 1960s was driven by the entry of physicists who saw new opportunities to bring their thinking into understanding biology. And I think maybe we're in a very ripe period of similar fashion with computational scientists who can now look at biology and recognize the kinds of impact they can have, and we embrace that. We need new ideas. That's why we're here. We need new people thinking in different ways, challenging us. 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, Pioneer had one basic platform, that was breeding. And now we've got a half a dozen really developed technology platforms, and they didn't all come baked from within the company.
Before we thank our guests, I'd like to make one comment. Innovation in agriculture is not limited by the access to technology. It is only limited by our ability to dream. And I challenge each of you in this room, whatever idea you may have, or someone you know, or those that are sharing this panel with me, continue to dream, because humanity counts on you. So let's thank our three panelists and appreciate your time.